All right, so you've given us quite the stack of political programs here, from all the German parties gearing up for the big one, the 2025 Bundestag election. Looks like you're really trying to get a grip on the landscape, understand those key issues, and maybe see where the different parties land on all this. So we've got drafts here from the BTW, the BSW, the FDP, and the AFD. Plus, we've got a bit of a longer one from the KM. Expert speaker, what do you think? When you just glance at this, what kind of picture starts to emerge?
Well, I'd say you can tell right away that Germany's kind of facing a complicated world right now. You've got the BTW and the KM, and just based on what I'm seeing here, I'm thinking this is probably the CDU-CSU, and they're really pushing this whole concept of system conflict. Basically, what they're getting at is they see this clash of ideologies, up against these more authoritarian states like Russia and China.
Okay, so what you're saying is they're preparing for a world where these different systems are kind of bumping heads, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And they're calling for a stronger, more unified Europe to counter that force, almost like a united front kind of thing. And they're really connecting economic competitiveness to the strengths of a liberal democracy. You know what I mean?
Oh, I see. So it's not just about military power. It's about proving that their system can deliver the goods economically, right?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah. But then you've got the BSW, and they also recognize this global economic competition, but they're, I'd say, a bit more cautious about, a new Cold War, big arms race.
Wait, hold on. They're talking about renegotiating with Russia for cheaper gas through the Nord Stream pipeline. Isn't that kind of risky, especially given everything going on with Russia right now?
Yeah, it's definitely controversial, but it shows you that there's this energy debate, inside Germany, especially as they're moving away from fossil fuels. It's like they're trying to walk softly but carry a big stick,
Interesting. Now, the AFD, they're taking a very different route here, aren't they?
Totally different. Strong nationalist focus, a lot of skepticism about the EU, and international organizations, very much that Germany first approach. They even want to get rid of the CO2 border adjustment mechanism, which is basically a tariff on goods, coming from countries with weaker climate policies.
So they're not too keen on global cooperation then?
Not really, no. They're putting German sovereignty and German interests, first and foremost. And then you've got the FDP, and they're talking about systemic rivalry. They want Germany to be a leader in, a reformed EU, but their focus is very much on technological innovation and a more classic, liberal economic stance.
And let's not forget their idea for a negative income tax. This would be a system that could actually simplify welfare and maybe even incentivize work. Is that even possible?
Well, it's a bold idea, that's for sure. And it shows just how committed they are to market-driven solutions. So even when you're talking about the global landscape, you see this whole spectrum of perspectives, Each party's tapping into these anxieties and hopes of the German voters.
Okay, so we've got, in a sense, the global stage. But let's get down to what really matters, right? How are these parties planning to handle those economic challenges that Germany's up against? It seems like everyone agrees that the economy and jobs are at the top of voters' minds.
Oh, absolutely. The BTW and the KOM, they've got this slogan, strong economy for secure jobs. And they're really pushing innovation, green tech, and support for those. Small and medium-sized enterprises, the SMEs. They also want to make it easier to do business in Germany,
So less red tape, basically.
Exactly. They're suggesting a digital-first approach for things like permits and licenses, which I think could make Germany more appealing to entrepreneurs, They've even got a specific plan, a 10% investment premium for companies. And they're aiming to reach 3.5% of GDP investment in R&D.
Wow, that's ambitious. But is it realistic?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Now, the BSW, they're worried about those high energy prices and what they see as unfair corporate taxation.
So they're more focused on protecting German workers and businesses then?
Yeah, I think so. They're calling for more government intervention to kind of shield domestic industries and workers from the downsides of globalization, And then there's the AfD with their message about protecting German jobs and pushing back against free trade, that populist approach.
And remember, they want to ditch that CO2 border adjustment mechanism. I guess they're really not fans of those global climate agreements?
Seems that way. They're really putting national economic interests first. And then we have the FDP, who are sticking to their classic liberal approach, deregulation, tax cuts, investing in education, and digital infrastructure. It's their go-to move.
But that negative income tax proposal, I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. It's such a radical departure from how things are usually done.
It really is. They argue it would make the welfare system simpler and cut down on all the bureaucracy. But of course, it brings up questions about whether it would actually work.
So when it comes to economics, we're seeing this tension between those who want the government to be more hands-on with managing the economy and those who prefer a more hands-off approach. Seems like a pretty fundamental difference, right?
You got it. These economic debates are going to be a key battleground in this election, that's for sure.
Okay, we've covered how these parties view the world and their economic positions. But what about climate change? Is it as big of an issue in Germany as it is elsewhere?
It's definitely on their radar, but the approaches, I'd say, vary quite a bit. The BTW and KOM, they're really pushing this nature that we protect angle. It's all about environmental protection, biodiversity, climate adaptation, and sustainable development, you know?
It's a pretty comprehensive approach, then.
Yeah, they even want to phase out those harmful forever chemicals, which is a stark contrast to the AfD, who are basically dismissing environmental concerns and criticizing this whole concept of a great transformation.
So while the BTWKM are pushing for a greener Germany, the AfD is saying environmental regulations are a threat to freedom and economic growth. That's a pretty significant difference.
Oh, it is. And it'll likely be a major point of contention in this election, you know. The BSW, though, they're somewhere in between. They want these pragmatic environmental policies that'll support domestic agriculture, but they're skeptical of those more radical climate policies that might harm German industry.
So they're walking a tightrope, trying to balance protecting the environment
with protecting jobs, right?
That's exactly it. And then you have the FDP, who are like all about innovation in green tech. They see the economic potential in environmental solutions, but they're cautious about too much government intervention. They believe the market can drive those changes.
So even on climate change, there's a whole range of perspectives, from fully embracing a greener future to basically downplaying the whole issue.
That's right. And that brings us to what might be the most divisive topic of all social issues and identity. All right, let's get into that. From what I've seen, this is where the party differences become really clear. We're talking about the kind of society they want to build in Germany.
Exactly. And the BTW and the KMM, they're taking a pretty progressive stance. It's all about social justice, inclusion, equal opportunities, strengthening families and communities. They even want to reform the law on abortion, which is a big hot-button issue in Germany.
So they're definitely aligning themselves with a more liberal social outlook.
Yeah, for sure. But then you have the BSW, who are concerned about social cohesion and those more traditional values. They seem worried about the impact of globalization and immigration on German culture.
Okay, so a more conservative approach.
Yeah.
Emphasizing continuity and stability.
Yeah, exactly. But the AfD takes it even further. Hardline stance on immigration, national identity, very much focused on those traditional family values and social conservatism.
And they want to ban puberty blockers and gender-affirming surgery for minors. We're talking about the government stepping into deeply personal choices.
It's super sensitive. And the FDP, as you might expect, is on the opposite end of the spectrum. They're all about individual freedom, tolerance, and diversity. Equal rights for everyone, regardless of their background or lifestyle.
So it's pretty clear that social issues will be a major battleground in this election. But before we dive too deep into those debates, let's switch gears to another crucial area: security and foreign policy.
Great point. This is where those anxieties about a changing world are going to be front and center, I think.
Absolutely. So how do these parties plan to keep Germany safe in this world that's, becoming increasingly unpredictable? Let's break it down.
Well, the BTW and KM, they've got this slogan, securing peace and freedom. And they're all about a strong Europe, a strong NATO. They want a robust defense, but they also believe in diplomacy. And working together with other countries, multilaterally, they even suggest reforming the UN Security Council so more regions of the world can have a say.
That's a pretty big goal. It sounds like they're aiming for Germany to have a more active role on the global stage.
Yeah, exactly. They see Germany as needing to step up and take on more responsibility, especially with all these tensions we've been talking about, with Russia and China. But the BSW, they're a bit more inward-looking, I'd say.
How so?
Well, they're focused on strengthening the German military, the police, and the intelligence services. They're a little skeptical of getting involved in international situations that don't directly benefit Germany. You know what I mean?
So a more cautious approach to foreign policy.
Yeah, definitely. More about protecting German interests. And then, of course, you have the AfD pushing that hard Germany first agenda, strong borders, a crackdown on crime and immigration, and a deep distrust of the EU and any kind of international cooperation. They even want to limit military service to German citizens only.
Wow, that's a pretty strong statement. It seems like they're really pushing back against the idea of a multicultural Germany.
Yeah, you could say that. They're tapping into that segment of the population that feels threatened by globalization and immigration. And then lastly, you have the FDP, who are advocating for what they call a smart foreign policy.
What does that even mean?
Well, they want a mix of diplomacy, economic power, and a credible military, to navigate this complex world we live in. It's a more pragmatic approach, trying to find the right balance for Germany's role in the world.
So we're seeing, again, this wide range of viewpoints on a really crucial issue. Each party's offering a different roadmap for how Germany should interact with the rest of the world.
That's a great way to put it. And I think it's important to remember, these are just the starting points, right? As the campaign heats up, we'll probably see these positions evolve and become even more nuanced.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about how these parties see the world, their economic plans, their stances on climate change, their visions for German society, and their approaches to security and foreign policy. But I want to dig a little deeper now. What are some of those specific details in these programs that really stood out to you? Things that maybe reveal what these parties are really all about?
That's a great question. I think it's often in the details that we see, like how things will actually work. For example, that BSW proposal to renegotiate with Russia for cheaper gas, through the Nord Stream pipeline. That's a risky move. But it shows how concerned they are about energy prices and the impact on German industry and consumers.
It's definitely a gamble, considering the current state of affairs with Russia. It makes you wonder, are they downplaying those potential geopolitical consequences?
Yeah, it's a valid concern. And then there's the FDP with that idea of a negative income tax. That one really caught my eye. It's such a radical departure from the current welfare system, and it would be fascinating to see how it would actually play out in practice.
It seems like a pretty big experiment with potentially big consequence.
For sure. And then there's the BTW and KM's focus on attracting skilled labor. They talk about making it easier to recognize foreign qualifications, which seems crucial given the, demographic challenges in Germany.
Right, they've got an aging population and a shrinking workforce.
Yeah.
So bringing in skilled workers from other countries seems essential.
Exactly. But then you see the AfD's proposal to limit military service to German citizens only, which really highlights their nationalist stance and their skepticism of multiculturalism.
It's like they're drawing a very clear line around what it means to be German.
Yeah, that's one way to interpret it. And then there are the social issues. The BTW and KM's support for reforming the law on abortion shows how these ongoing societal debates are playing out in politics. It's a reminder that even in a country like Germany, these fundamental rights are still being debated.
It seems like those debates are only going to intensify as we get closer to the election.
I think you're right. And then you have the AfD with their proposal to ban puberty blockers and gender-affirming surgery for minors. It's a very controversial issue that reflects their, very conservative social views.
It's a reminder that these programs aren't just about, abstract policies. They're about real people's lives and the choices they make.
Absolutely. And then there's the BTW and KM's proposal to make culture a state goal, enshrined in the German Constitution. It suggests a commitment to protecting and promoting German culture, which some might see as a response to those AfD anxieties about immigration and globalization.
It's like they're trying to offer a more inclusive vision of German culture, one that embraces diversity but also recognizes the importance of shared traditions.
That's a good way to think about it. And then there's the FDP embracing new technologies, even controversial ones like nuclear power, they're proposing, to allow for new generation nuclear plants like thorium reactors.
That'll be a tough sell, considering how strong the anti-nuclear sentiment is in Germany.
It will. But it shows their commitment to finding innovative solutions to complex problems, even if those solutions are unpopular.
So even in these seemingly small details, we can see the core values and priorities of these parties, right? It's like they're giving us a glimpse into their souls, as cheesy as that sounds.
I think that's a great way to put it. These programs aren't just about winning an election, They're about shaping the future of Germany.
Okay, so we've explored some of those specific proposals. That caught your attention. But I'm curious about what's missing from these programs. What are they not saying that might be just as revealing?
The silences. That's where things get really interesting. For example, none of these programs really address the issue of Germany's aging population and the long-term sustainability of their social welfare system.
It's the elephant in the room, isn't it?
Yeah.
They all talk about securing pensions and health care, but no one really offers any concrete solutions for how to pay for it all. As the population gets older and the workforce shrinks.
Exactly. And it suggests a reluctance to confront voters with those uncomfortable realities, especially when it might require, difficult choices about spending cuts or tax increases.
It's like they're avoiding the tough questions.
I think that's a fair assessment. And there's also a lack of detail about how they plan to address that growing gap between the rich and poor in Germany.
Inequality is a sensitive topic, but it's definitely becoming more relevant.
It is. And the silence on this issue suggests a lack of political will to really tackle it head on. And then there's the whole issue of technology and automation.
You're right. None of them really offer concrete solutions for how to manage that transition to a more automated economy and how to make sure workers aren't left behind.
It's a critical issue, and it's already impacting jobs and industries all over the world. And it's only going to become more important in the years to come.
So it seems like there are a few elephants in the room, so to speak. Issues that are shaping the future of Germany, but that these parties are hesitant to address directly.
I think that's a fair observation, and it's something for voters to keep in mind as they're evaluating these programs.
Okay, so we've talked about the silences, but now I want to hear about the surprises. Were there any unexpected proposals or twists that caught you off guard?
There were a few. I was surprised to see the BTW and KMM proposing to reform the UN Security Council, to give more regions of the world a seat at the table. It's a pretty bold idea that shows their commitment to a more equitable global order.
Quite a contrast to the AfD's Germany First approach.
It is. And then there's the BSW's proposal to introduce a citizens' assembly to deliberate on those complex issues, like climate change and social justice.
That sounds interesting. What exactly is a citizens' assembly?
Well, it's a group of randomly selected citizens who come together to learn about an issue, discuss it, and make recommendations. It's a way to get a wider range of perspectives, and maybe break through the gridlock of traditional party politics.
It's like a mini democracy within a democracy.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
I think so, too. And then, of course, there's that FDP proposal for a negative income tax. That one definitely came out of left field.
It's radical, but it's also kind of refreshing to see a party that's willing to think outside the box.
I agree. It shows they're willing to challenge the status quo and try new things.
So even in these, predictable political programs, there are still some surprises to be found. It's a reminder that politics is dynamic, and you never really know what might come next.
That's what makes it so fascinating.
Okay, so we've explored the silences, the surprises, and everything in between. But I want to step back for a moment and think about the bigger picture. What do these programs tell us about the state of German democracy? Are there any underlying trends or concerns that we should be paying attention to?
Well, there are a few that stand out to me. First, I think the rise of the AfD is a serious cause for concern.
How so?
Well, their success in tapping into those feelings of grievance and resentment, especially among those who feel left behind by globalization and social change, it's a warning sign,
Yeah. So even in a stable and prosperous democracy like Germany, there are vulnerabilities that can be exploited.
Exactly. And it's crucial to address those underlying economic and social anxieties that are fueling this trend. Otherwise, we risk seeing similar movements gain even more traction in the future.
That's a sobering thought. What else are you seeing?
Well, the increasing complexity of these programs reflects the growing challenges that governments are facing. In the 21st century, climate change, technological disruption, demographic shifts, these are all complex issues with no easy answers.
It seems like governing has gotten a lot harder in recent years.
I think that's fair to say. And it's a trend that's likely to continue. We need new ideas, innovative approaches to solve these problems.
So are you saying the old ways of doing things aren't working anymore?
It's a possibility. And lastly, I think that declining trust in those traditional institutions, political parties and the media, that's a worrying trend.
We're seeing that in other countries too.
Exactly. And it makes it harder to build consensus and find common ground.
So what could be done about it?
I think it requires a renewed commitment to transparency, accountability, and civic engagement. We need to rebuild trust in our institutions and in each other.
That's a tall order, but it seems essential if we want to preserve democracy. in the 21st century.
I agree.
Okay, so we've identified some key concerns, but let's end on a more positive note. What are some of the strengths and resiliencies of German democracy that give you hope for the future?
Well, for starters, Germany has a strong commitment to the rule of law and an independent judiciary. Those are crucial safeguards against authoritarianism.
So there are checks and balances in place to prevent the abuse of power.
Exactly. And Germany also has a vibrant civil society. With all those associations, NGOs, and advocacy groups, it's a testament to their democratic culture.
It's a space where citizens can come together, discuss issues, debate ideas, and hold their leaders accountable.
Exactly. And it's a far cry from the AfD's vision of a society where dissent is suppressed and conformity is enforced. And lastly, Germany has a strong economy and a tradition of social welfare, which provides a foundation for stability and resilience.
So despite the challenges, there's still a lot to be optimistic about.
I think so. And ultimately, it's up to the German people to decide what kind of future they want for their country.
That's a great point. These programs are just a starting point. It's up to each individual to engage with the issues, learn more, and make their voices heard.
I couldn't agree more.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground today. We've explored the big ideas, the policy proposals, the unspoken truths, and the surprises hidden within these political programs. We've talked about the challenges facing Germany and the strengths that give us hope for the future. But now it's time to shift our focus to you, the listener. We've given you a lot to consider here, but now we want to hear from you. What really jumped out at you from these programs? What spoke to, your hopes and concerns for Germany's future?
I think it's really fascinating how these programs show us a Germany that's at this crossroads, not just for itself, but for the future of democracy in this changing world.
What do you mean by that?
Well, think about those issues that are front and center in this election. Globalization, economic inequality, technology changing everything, climate change. These social and cultural anxieties, the erosion of trust in institutions, these aren't just German problems. These are global trends,
You're right. These are challenges that democracies everywhere are facing.
Exactly. And how Germany deals with these things could have ripple effects way beyond its own borders.
So Germany's kind of a test case, then, for how democracies can adapt and thrive in the 21st century.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to look at it. And these political programs offer different ways forward, each with its own set of risks and potential rewards. You've got the BTW and KM, who are advocating for a Germany that's more assertive, both at home and on the world stage, but still rooted in those core values of liberal democracy.
So strength and responsibility go hand in hand for them.
Yeah, you could put it that way. They believe Germany needs to be strong to protect its interests and defend those values in a world that's, getting tougher. Then you've got the BSW calling for a more cautious and pragmatic approach.
Okay, so more focus on those immediate concerns and protecting those who are most vulnerable.
Exactly. They seem to be speaking to those who are worried about how fast things are changing and are seeking stability and security. And then you have the FDP, who are embracing that change, that disruption. They see technology and innovation as the keys to progress and prosperity.
They're looking ahead then, betting on Germany's ability to adapt and thrive in this rapidly changing world.
Right. They're not afraid to shake things up and try new things. And then, of course, you have the AfD, who are tapping into those anxieties and fears, They're offering a worldview that's more simplistic, more divisive.
One that sets up this us versus them dynamic and tries to turn back the clock on all this progress.
Yeah, unfortunately. And that path, historically, has led to some pretty dark places. So the stakes are high in this election, that's for sure. It's not just about picking a government. It's about choosing a direction for Germany and maybe even for democracy itself.
It sounds like a pivotal moment.
I think it is. And what's interesting is there's no easy answer. Each of these paths has its own potential downsides and benefits. It's up to the German people to decide which way they want to go.
It reminds us that democracy is messy, it's unpredictable, but it's still the best way we have to face those tough choices and make sure that everyone's voice gets heard.
I think that's a really important point. And the fact that all these different viewpoints are being discussed so openly and with so much energy, that's a sign that German democracy is healthy.
It's in that clash of ideas, that back and forth of values, that democracy finds its strength, its ability to bounce back.
Exactly. And in the end, it's up to the citizens to be part of that debate, to learn, to get informed, and to make their voices count.
So as you're thinking about these programs and the visions they offer, we encourage you to really think critically, ask those hard questions, and decide which path forward best reflects your hopes and concerns for Germany's future.
Because this deep dive it's just the beginning?
The real exploration, that starts now.
Yeah.
And it's all up to you.